Hello and welcome to another episode of The Wannabe Entrepreneur, the podcast about what it's like to bootstrap a company. Today we have another interview, a great one, with Giordano. Hey Giordano, how are you?
I'm good, thanks, Tiago. Thanks for having me.
Giordano is the founder of the Juice Media, a YouTube channel that started a few years ago with a program called The Rap News that got a very interesting success. And a couple of years ago, they released a new set of videos called Honest Government Ads. They are satires that cover multiple political issues and human issues, really, like climate change. And that's how I found out about Giordano and the Juice Media with a video, I believe it's called Net Zero by 2050, a very interesting satire about what our politicians are actually not doing to reach the goal of net zero in 2050. And I got completely hooked, and I've watched many of the Juice Media videos, and these Honest Government Ads had brought a new degree of success, right, Giordano? How many followers do you have now?
On YouTube, about 800,000, yeah.
Wow, 800,000,
Yeah.
so close to a million.
Yeah,
So
we're getting there.
It's definitely a huge success. Yeah, Jordan, I would start by asking you to, in your own words, introduce yourself to the listeners. Who is Giordano?
Well, hey everyone, I'm Giordano. I live in Melbourne, in Australia, so opposite side of the world to Tiago. And wherever you are, I hope this finds you well and your families. We're living in crazy times. It's a crazy time to be alive, but also a very exciting time to be alive. So I just want to say hi to everyone in these crazy times. And I decided about 5 years ago. I was working as an academic at the University of Melbourne, and I had been doing a YouTube show on the side called Rap News, which was on the YouTube channel that Tiago mentioned, the Juice Media, and that collaboration, which was wonderful and very productive, came to an end around about 2015. And so I had a choice. I really enjoyed producing online content, but I had a choice whether to try and keep doing that or whether to keep working in the academic world as a historian, which is what I trained to do. I did a PhD in history, mainly focused on settler colonialism, 19th century British settler colonialism. So I was looking at the colonization of lands in South Africa and Australia under the British Empire. And that was really what I trained for. And but on the side, when YouTube came along in 2005, I was just immediately captured by this world. And I always say that, I had an education from university, but then I also had an education from YouTube. And I learned so much from, especially from the early days when it was a bit of a wild west. You could just find a lot of weird stuff, a lot of comedy shows that had been re-uploaded. So I learned so much from comedians like George Carlin and Bill Hicks, which I'd never heard about, because that's just, before YouTube, it was kind of like a very different internet, really. And all of a sudden, I started learning a lot. And that was really a formative time. It was probably in my early 30s, actually late 20s. And then in my early 30s, I loved this medium so much. And I thought, shit, I'm alive at the time that this new community and this new channel of information was coming to light. It feels crazy to keep working, in a field that's old, like an old-fashioned sort of. I think academia is very important, and there's a lot of important things that happen there, and it's we definitely need it. But I was very excited about being involved in what was the new emerging culture, which came from YouTube, and it was a very exciting time. And so I made the decision the slightly crazy decision to not pursue academic work and to put all of my time and effort into creating a YouTube channel that could be a full-time job. I didn't want to do it as a hobby. I wanted it to be like my thing, I wanted to be my life's work. Yeah. And so, that's what happened. And the show that we created that sort of made that come about was called Honest Government Ads.
So let's go back to the decision of working in academia and in particular in history. Why are you interested in that topic?
That's a very good question. I actually didn't realize I didn't realize why I was interested in it until after I had done my PhD. There's sometimes when I finished school, I had a lot of different interests, but I didn't exactly know what I wanted to do. So I did an arts degree at university, which is what a lot of people who don't know exactly what they want to do. And by arts, I mean humanities. So not
Right,
fine
right.
arts, but history, psychology, philosophy, English, literature, all of those kind of things, politics also, all kind of fitting into that sort of category. And I started studying. I was interested in ancient history and medieval history, and then eventually I started becoming interested in more modern history. And I don't know, it was just something that I became really interested in. Specifically, I was interested in a very specific idea, which was time. The concept of time and
Right.
how it is that the whole world today agrees to work according to the clock. There are not many things that everyone on the planet agrees on, but we all seem to agree on time.
You even wrote a book about it, right?
Yeah, I did. I ended up. Well,
Yeah.
this became an obsession. I was obsessed with the idea of why is it we can have different religions, languages, races, genders, everything can be
It's so
different, and
interesting.
everything
Yeah.
is kind of moving into diversity and that kind of direction. But time was this real kind of like example of almost taken for granted hegemony, something you don't even question. And I was
Yeah.
really interested in the history of how that came about, so I began researching that.
Is there even another option? I don't know. Like, it's such an interesting question. I never questioned that. Right?
Yeah.
You need to have some way to measure the time. No, there's some way to measure how long you worked, how long you sleep. Like, is there even another way to conduct your life without having the clock?
Well, not in this culture that we inhabit, but if this is why this question about how did this all come about is intrinsically connected to European colonization, because the understanding and the culture of time that we have isn't natural. It's a product of Western European culture, capitalist culture, and it's all tied to the demands of industry and the Industrial Revolution. If you want workers to work if you want workers in Germany to be producing textiles and export them to Lisbon so that they can be taken out on a ship to go to London and then they go on a train, everything has to be coordinated with timetables and clocks. So if you want
Right.
a global industry and synchronization, you have to have a common understanding of time.
Yeah.
But of course, there are many different ways of living under different time cultures, and these are the time cultures, of the Aboriginal people of Australia, or the Kalahari San people of Southern Africa, or the Hopi people in in Native America, and all of these calendars, which are very much tied to local seasons, are all different, and they're all very much tied to nature. And also to ritual,
Right.
and all of these had to be disempowered and had to be repressed in order for colonization to take place. In order for
Right.
your Aboriginal person to become a worker, they had to adopt the clock and the calendar and the 7-day week. So there was a process of colonization which was
That's
violent.
true.
So the reason that we all live by the clock today isn't by choice. A lot of it is through coercion and through colonization. And even today, there's a lot of resistance to it. Depending on who you are and where you are, you can find a lot of places that still disobey and resist the power of the clock. So that's what this obsession of mine was about, and I ended up writing a PhD about it, and
It's
then a
so
book.
interesting. I've never thought of
So
it.
I spent about 10 years researching this particular question of history. And when I finished the PhD, I kind of went, what the fuck have I done with my life? Like I've spent a lot of time writing about this, and I'm really glad
Again,
that I
time.
did. Yeah, that's right. And it was really a little while after I think the couple of years after my PhD, I spent quite a lot of time thinking I'd made a terrible decision. And I think this is actually something that a lot of people who do PhDs, people who kind of finish school, go to uni, then they study and they don't take a break, they don't travel. That I was very much like, oh, I'm just going to do this, And I think sometimes if you do that, you can kind of finish a PhD and then you go, now what,
Yeah.
And
Yeah. And it's kind of brutal too, right? So my girlfriend, she also did a PhD, and it's
How's she
and
going?
obviously I met a lot of her friends that were also doing the PhD now. Now it's in biology. Now she's actually working in the industry, as they call. But it's definitely a very hard process, especially, and I guess we can also talk a little bit about this, is how the whole academia is constructed, right? You need to make and write papers so that you get the best scholarships, and then these papers are always written in the way that only academics can access and can read. So it's really hard. For instance, every time she would explain to me her thesis, it would be really hard for me to understand, because there's this particular language on how science is written. And
Yeah.
when I was doing a little research about yourself, I know that this is also one of the reasons why you moved to YouTube, right? Because you wanted to make your research more accessible to everyone, right?
Yeah. Yeah, absolutely. I felt we live in a time of it, like I said at the start, it's pretty crazy time to be alive. It's exciting, but we're also living in very, very the weight of history on us right now is so heavy. And, as a historian, I became really aware of this interesting idea that history isn't something that we just study. It's something that happened in the past. It's happening right now. We are writing history.
True.
And, I've always had this sort of saying, which was a bit of an epiphany for me. And it's really when I realized why I was glad that I'd studied history. And it's a little saying that we have at the Juice Media that I often invoke, which is history is happening. In other words, we are living through history. The choices that we make right now will be written about in the history books of the future. So, what is the history that we want to write? And I don't know. It seems almost common sense, but it was something that I really kind of just hit me like a ton of bricks. And then I went, fuck, I did a PhD in history. Actually, this is really handy because I really want to try and channel that. And but the importance of the time that we live in, like you can go, oh, okay, great. Oh, I'll go and write a book about that, or I'll write an article about it. But we live in such urgent times. The clock is ticking. I mean, the climate and emergency is one clock that's ticking. The biodiversity and environmental extinction crisis that's happening is another clock that's ticking. We have so many dire problems that are coming to a head. There isn't really time to, engage at such a glacial pace, which, if you try and publish an article, it can be a year before you get before you get some of the feedback back. It can be 2 years before it gets published. Books take a long time to publish. I've published 2, and I know, that it's hard. Anyway, if that was the only way of communicating, sure, I would do it that way. But it seemed crazy. Like here we have this medium, as I said, which is so instantaneous. It's such a direct connection. And this is where so many young people, not only young people, but especially young people, are going to for information. Right. Yeah. So it just made sense to me. Like, if I want to be useful in the world, if I want to do something that really has a lot of impact, this is where I should put my energy. And so it felt like a really sensible decision from that regard, not so much from a career regard, because like who makes money out of making YouTube? Okay, now it's kind of like, now we know. Yeah,
it's funny because I don't know if your kids also tell you this, but a lot of kids now already aspire to be YouTubers as a profession.
Yeah,
that's before it was football players or whatever, astronauts, and now a lot of people say like, I want to be a YouTuber.
That's right.
So we're writing history, as you say. Like maybe in the future, in the history books, it will be written that YouTube was created in 2000 and something, and this will be part of the history for sure. That's a very interesting thought. Tell me about your book. So you wrote 2 books, right? The first one is the one related to time. How is the because I guess this is already a kind of a bootstrapping project, an entrepreneurial project. You're writing a book. You are expecting to get people to buy it and to get paid. How was the whole process? Was it profitable or not so much?
No, I didn't expect to get paid. Actually, I mean, there's an interesting story there, but no, I didn't. I didn't write the book as a way of earning money. I never expected to get anything from it. As it turns out, I got a lot more than I thought I would. But the reason for that is that when I signed when I received the contract from the publisher, they gave me the contract said we'll pay you £250 British pounds check for the book, but you hand over the copyright to us, so you don't get any royalties going forward. And I wrote back and I said, yeah, I don't like that. I would rather have the royalties. And they said, sure, we're happy to do that. You can have the standard 5% royalties, but just to let you know, you probably won't earn as much from the royalties as you do from this check, so we encourage you to take it.
Wait, the check was £250?
Pounds, yeah.
That was it.
Yeah, but you have to understand. Right? So you have to understand that it's a privilege to be published by a good publisher. So an academic, a young academic, I was 20. I can't remember now, maybe 27 or 28, who has never published anything, who's just finished their PhD. Sometimes people pay to have their book published, their first book published, So to actually have your book published is without having to pay is already a win. If the publisher is a good publisher, and this was a good publisher, Manchester University Press, very good, reputable publisher, that's a double win. And then if they give you £250, it's like, wow, you've really scored. And so everyone just takes that because it's like, sure, that's fine. And a lot of these books are very academic books. They don't tend to sell a lot. Usually they do one print run and that's it, and that's it. But I didn't care about that. I was like, no, I'm working really hard on this book too, because after I finished the PhD, I really went and researched more and I perfected and I improved it. And I was like, I can't do this work if I don't feel like I'm going to be connected to it. I want to know that the more work I put into it now, the better it is, the more I'm going to be rewarded. Not that money was the issue, but it just felt like something that connected me to the book. If it did badly, that's okay. But if it did well, I would be like, great, And funnily enough, it did much better than expected. And I even now I get a yearly royalty check of at least 120, 150 pounds, and that's for the last 10 years. So I ended up making at least 5 times. I don't know. I haven't done the maths, but I ended up earning significantly more than if I'd accepted that check. So, but it wasn't a money-making thing. It was just, I think I'm only mentioning it because I think as authors, especially academic authors, sometimes we don't get paid anything. And so I encourage people to just go for the royalty, even if it doesn't add up too much. If if there's no surety, it just connects you to your work. And I think that actually makes you do better work.
You're doing this book on the side, right? I mean, you had your job, maybe a postdoc, a gig after you finish your doctorship, and then you're doing the book on the side, right? It's not part of your job, or was it?
You, Tiago, you think too highly of me. When I finished my PhD, I had no job, I had no postdoc. Like I said, I really didn't know what I was going to do. I did odd jobs. I was doing manual labor. I was painting houses. I was digging trenches. I was working, whatever jobs I could do. I was doing a bit of translation, a bit of everything, really.
Interesting. Because there was no job for a historian PhD.
Yeah. No, it's not a very sought after qualification. I mean, look, if you're a very dedicated PhD student, which I wasn't, I spent a lot of time watching YouTube videos and getting high and just like I said, I was interested I was watching Bill Hicks and George Carlin and playing music and I was I worked on my PhD, but I wasn't preparing to become an academic. So I wasn't a good student,
Right.
And if you're a good student, you publish your papers and you do lots of conferences. And when you finish, you've got a good CV and maybe you'll get a postdoc, or at least you'll get something, and then eventually you get a postdoc. But no, I finished my PhD, I had no idea what to do. And then I realized I really wanted to publish the thesis. I just felt like it needed to be, I wanted to put it out into the world. It felt terrible to me that you write this, you spend so many years researching, and then the thesis just sits in the library and no one really looks at it. And so I did that, and I did it on my own time. And I think it was the only time in my whole life that I was on the dole. I think I was on the dole for about 3 months on employment benefits just to get me by.
Yeah,
And
yeah.
and I published a book, and that was around about the same time that we started the Rap News project,
Right.
which was the beginning of the Juice Media YouTube channel. Yeah.
How did it feel to have people actually reading your thesis and reading your book? Like knowing that there's people actually, caring and learning from your research. Did it feel good?
It's fantastic. I mean, I don't know. I feel like the books are very hard to get feedback. It's not like YouTube comments. People tell you in the comments whether they like your video or they don't like your video. Books is a bit harder. There's been some reviews, academic reviews, and they've been very positive. And some readers write reviews, but it's hard to actually know what
True.
people think.
Yeah.
But because I have a bit more of a public profile with the Juice Media, lately I have been receiving emails from people saying, I saw your videos, and then I went to the website and I learned that you've written this book, and I've been a lot of people are interested in time. It's not surprising. We all have an experience of time, and it's a subject that relates to all of us. So a lot of people have bought the book, and some of them write to me and go, they really enjoyed it. But it's just a fraction really of people. I don't know. I love it, but it's not like the YouTube videos where I know, and this is one of the reasons that I would never go back to writing books, is that I love the energy that, when you publish something on YouTube or, whatever platform, you're working on, you get that response, and it feeds your work, and you go,
definitely.
and it just fuels you. You want to do it again and again, and it becomes like this addictive cycle. But it's a positive addiction in the sense that, I'm providing something, people enjoy it, they tell me how much they enjoy it, I do it again.
Yeah, definitely. Which is a little bit against what happens in academia, right? Where you don't seek for the common people approval, it's more your peers. It's a bit different, right?
Look, it is different, and I don't want to say that it's not. It's different. It's not better or worse. I think it depends on what kind of a person you are. But in the academic world, you'll present at a conference, you'll give a paper. If it's a very good paper, people will tell you about it. You'll get that energy back from people. If you publish an article and people read it, which is not very usual. Most articles don't even get read. So if people critique it or they compliment it, it's wonderful. But the numbers are pretty small. It's only really until you develop a pretty big academic profile that you start to get that same energy. So it's very elite. Like, you have to be very, very good to get that kind of energy with your readers. It's like, it's very hard. Whereas, I don't know, again, I'm not saying it's easy to make YouTube content. It's not. It's very hard, but it's a lot easier, whatever you do, to get a response from the people that watch,
Yeah, it's more accessible too, right?
Yeah.
Kind of everyone can do it. So you're just telling the story on how the Juice Media started. And it started with the Rap News, right? Can you tell a little bit about this project?
Yeah. So Rap News was a show that I did in collaboration with Hugo Farrant, who's a British-born rapper who migrated to Australia. Around about the time that I'd, as I mentioned, that I'd finished publishing the book, and I was trying to decide what to do next. And we got together and we shared a passion in what was happening in the world, in politics, in music. We shared a lot of common interests in literature and philosophy and humor as well. And it basically, we decided to make this show that was a news broadcast, all delivered in rap. Hugo's a very good rapper. I'm not a rapper, but I had a lot of ideas, and he wanted to collaborate. And so we put together this outfit, which ended up becoming quite a popular show. It had developed like a cult following. It basically ran from 2009 to 2015, so 6 years. And we covered all sorts of topics. We focused a lot on US policy, domestic and foreign policy, a lot on a bit of Australian politics, but not so much. A lot of technology, a lot of the internet. So we were really focused a lot on, issues like in the crypto wars, not cryptocurrency, although that kind of came into it. I mean, more like encryption, in privacy and the surveillance state and the different laws that were being introduced, like SOPA and ACTA, to try and really bring a surveillance state into the world of the internet. And then, of course, the Snowden revelations and WikiLeaks. We focused a lot on WikiLeaks, and we covered a lot of I think a lot of people learned about Julian Assange and WikiLeaks through some of our earliest Rap News episodes, which focused on
How many views do they have?
They all have a bit different, but the ones that we made on WikiLeaks, a good 1 million views. That was, kind of like the ballpark. Mm-hmm. But most of the videos that we made are probably like in the 500,000, on average.
Which views. Is really good. Really, really good.
Yeah, I mean, we thought we were doing something pretty. I mean, look, also, it's different to content. There's a content that gets a lot more views than that, but it's difficult to get political content, political satire, to get the same results in terms of views, because it's not about gaming. It's not about, pop culture or some, gossip or things that, attract the sort of the tween audience. You can get millions of views making pretty inane content. But if you want to make something that's a little bit more intellectual or sophisticated, you'd lose a lot of people. And so for us, that was like pretty amazing.
No, definitely. And I totally understand your point. I think it's much harder to make this kind of contents, also because sometimes they just get blocked. Or there's a lot of hatred and people that don't like it. So it's really easy to get a bad reputation, get downvotes or dislikes on YouTube. So it's not easy. And the fact that you got, with your first project, to this amount of views, it's really something. Were you already making a salary kind of out of this? Were you making money?
None of this really generated enough money. So, Hugo had a job. He was teaching English. And as I said, I was doing odd jobs. And then around about this time, I got a job at university as well. So here, actually, I was working on the side on another project, another history project that actually ended up getting me a position as a research associate at the University of Melbourne. So this was kind of me going back into academia, and this is when I started actually earning a proper salary as a researcher. And so at that point, I was doing, my main job was university, and YouTube was the sort of the side job. Right. And we were getting a little bit of money at this point. The main from income
YouTube,
was really
from YouTube itself. They would pay you?
No, when we started making YouTube videos, there was no ads. Like, you couldn't even monetize content. So that only started happening, I can't remember now, I'll probably get the wrong date, but it may be like 2011 or something like that. And we were quite resistant towards that. We didn't even want to monetize the videos because we didn't want to take ad revenue. So we actually didn't take ad revenue until, like, I don't know, we waited. And even then, it wasn't a lot. It wasn't a huge amount. No, most of the income that we got was from people sending us one-off tips on PayPal. Right, they loved the work that we did, and we did that. And eventually people convinced us to start a Patreon channel. There were like, this new platforms come out. I think it was 2014 or 13. And they said, you should use Patreon. It was a new thing. And I was like, what the hell? Okay, sure, we'll try it, And we set up the Patreon. And I was so ignorant about how the platform worked that, we made videos. And then one day, after about a year that I started the Patreon channel, someone wrote to us and said, hey, why aren't you posting any of this stuff to Patreon? Because if you don't post it to Patreon, you don't get paid. So we had like maybe 100 people or something like that on Patreon. And because I wasn't actually uploading it to Patreon, we never got that money. So for the first year, I didn't even know how to use the platform.
I didn't know that too. I thought people just pay you monthly, no matter what.
Well, now you have a monthly thing. But again, in the early days of Patreon, it was a per thing. So you had to upload the thing, whether it was a picture or a video or whatever. Then they introduced a monthly thing. So you could choose whether to get paid monthly or per thing. But for the first year, we got nothing. So we really, the financial part of it was quite a neglected part. But then what really changed all of that is that we were approached by Russia Today, which is the the global news channel that comes out of Russia, out of Moscow, and they really liked the work that we were doing, probably because we were doing a lot of anti-US imperialism stuff. We were, that's really that's what they're there for. It's basically anti-US soft propaganda, and they liked what we were doing, and they asked us if we would they offered us a show on their network, and we said no. We're not interested in, we wanted to have our own independence and all that. And they kept on asking us every time we made a really good video. They were like, "Oh, can we have a deal?" And eventually we agreed to do it, and we negotiated a contract where we had complete editorial independence, where they would allow us to upload it to our YouTube channel as well as them. Basically, it was a pretty generous deal on their part. And they, and I have to say, for all the stereotypes of Russia Today and whatnot, and they were very respectful of our editorial independence. We even ended up satirizing Putin and Russia Today itself.
Yeah, exactly. That's my question. Could you do that? Yeah. Was that okay?
Yeah, no, totally. I mean, the funniest story I think in the whole thing was
scared.
Yeah, I mean, we kind of knew that if we did this, if we signed up to work with Russia Today, we had to satirize Russia. Like before that, we've never said anything about Russia, not because we didn't want, just because we were focusing on the US and other issues, and Russia had never really come into our aim. And now that we were associated with this channel, we were like, okay, we're going to have to say something about Russia. And this was at the start of 2014. I think we did the first episode in January 2014, and then in March 2014, Russia invaded Ukraine, which is interestingly is kind of what's about to happen again now. I don't know if you remember, they invaded Crimea and they annexed that part. And it was around about the same time as the Olympics in Sochi. So we did an episode in which we satirized Russia Today, presenting the invasion of Crimea as just another event in the Winter Olympics. Like, no, don't worry, it's not a war, it's not an invasion, it's just another sporting event. Don't worry about it, And we had Putin in there, and we had a cameo from Abby Martin, who was at the time, she's a US journalist, but she was an anchor for RT, and she came on. And despite all of the stuff and taking the piss out of Putin and Russia Today, they aired. Not only did they not cancel the contract or tell us to change anything, but they aired it on Russia Today, which I was like, respect, because it's a show of strength. If you can laugh at yourself, it actually makes you stronger than if you try to censor and repress.
Yeah, and it's definitely not aligned with the news that we see coming from Russia, right?
Yeah, and I should add that is a very common thing in Russia. I'm not trying to say, that doesn't happen. That definitely happens, but it wasn't our experience. And it was quite an eye-opening experience. Anyway, that was our income. So we started then earning an income from Rap News.
How much were you making?
Oh gosh, I don't remember the amounts, but I'll probably be very sketchy on amounts. I won't get into details on the actual figures, but it was enough. It was enough for us to. It was enough for Hugo to quit his job, and he had like a decent income for just to get him by. And then I was still working at the university, and eventually, this is around about the time that I was starting to think about maybe becoming a YouTuber, and so I was doing a bit of both. And so it basically allowed us to feel like we were actually earning an income from our creative work. But that was only after about 3 or 4 years that we'd been working at it. Yeah.
Also because you didn't focus in money from the start, right? You were mostly focused on making content. There were no ads in the beginning, but you didn't focus too much. Right? It seems that these kind of deals came to you. And instead of
absolutely.
Absolutely.
For them, right? And this is the thing is like, we were just so excited about being able to do this. Like it was we felt that if people watched what we were doing and they loved it, that was already such a win. That in itself was just such a wonderful feeling. And then the fact that people were giving us, tips on PayPal and a little bit on Patreon once we worked out how to use it, that was like a bonus. And then obviously, eventually we realized, okay, we want to do this full time. Then something changes. Then you go, okay, we didn't start off making this because we wanted to make money out of it, but we really love doing this, and we can't do it if we don't have an income, because it's very hard to do these things whilst you have a full-time job. All
How
your
long does it take to make one video, one of those rap news videos?
it depends. Like some would take us 3 weeks, and others would take us 3 days. It depends on the topic, on how urgent it
How
was,
inspired you
on
are as well.
exactly, yeah. And so once we got to that point, we realized, we do need to change how we think about this. We actually need to, that's why the Russia Today offer was so, we considered it, even though we had reservations and we negotiated a very specific contract. We were interested in it because it gave us a way of freeing us from, especially Hugo, who was working as a teacher, to free us from work. And that was really important. Nobody else, no one here in Australia was interested in funding us. Our local broadcasting TV station, we were way too political, way too edgy, I think, for our local news not news, but TV stations here. So
also because you're more focused in Australia, no, or US.
Rap news was more focused on the US, but everyone knew that we were based in Australia. Yeah.
Right. Tell me about the marketing. On how did you get to 1 million views, 500,000 views? Was it just posting the videos and waiting for the algorithm of YouTube to do its thing, or did you do some kind of marketing, some kind of advertising to grow your channel?
No, not really. You said earlier these things came to us, and that's really how everything has unfolded. And I'm not trying to say this is the only way to do it, but in my experience, the only thing that I've put a lot of work into, like really, really worked hard at and really focused on 90%, 95% even, is just writing good content, is just making things that people want to see. And to me, it just seems so logical because...
But these are two different things, right? One thing is to write good content. The other thing is writing things that people want to see, right? So you can write really great content about the topic that no one wants to see, right?
Tiago, I would say that great content is also something that people want to see. I would say that includes that, in the sense that you can write about anything really, and there's a way to make it relevant to, you can connect it, you can join the dots, whether it's finance or whether it's politics or whether it's history or whether it's, fantasy. If you can connect it and make it relevant to people's lives and issues and interests,
true.
Then it's great content. I think,
True. Definitely. And you can see on YouTube as well, there's, YouTubers of everything, old swords or recipes with only cheese. I don't know, very niche things, and then people have a lot of followership, a lot of viewing. So that's right. Definitely true. I guess Rap News ended, right? Why did it end it?
Well, that project, as I said, started in 2009. We wrapped it up in 2015, and probably the key reason was that that collaboration had come to a natural end. Some collaborations last for a long time. You look at Matt Stone and Trey Parker with South Park, and others are more short-lived. And Hugo's he's a very talented artist and performer, and he wanted to do a lot more. He wanted to do a lot more live performances. He had a lot of ideas that he wanted to develop, and Rap News had become quite a demanding project in itself. And I think, well, I don't think, this is pretty much what he expressed, was that he wanted to be able to do other things. And at the same time, also, we reached the end of our partnership with RT, so we didn't have that financial input anymore. And so those two things combined kind of brought the project to a natural end. I thought that I could continue to make Rap News, and I did make one more episode in 2016 about the 2016 election that Donald Trump won. And I had other collaborators. But I realized after making, and it was a very successful episode, people loved it, and I said, yeah, we'll continue. But I realized that was a project that really was successful because of my collaboration with Hugo, and what made it special was what we both brought to it. And I kind of felt like I was just trying to continue something I needed to be brave, and I needed to try and do something else. There was a temptation to kind of just stick with something just because it had worked, but I didn't want to ruin it. I didn't want to kill it. I wanted it to be there, and sort of, we ended on a high note. And I thought I was still quite young, I was early 30s or mid 30s at that point, and I thought, I should try something else, and eventually the Honest Government Ads is what the next project was.
So how did the idea came to be of the Honest Government Ads?
Sure. Well, I should mention that also at the same time as our Russia Today funding finished and Rap News finished, my university contract came to an end, and that's when I decided that I didn't want to continue. I didn't want to, basically renew that and keep going in that world. And I thought this is a good chance to just make a break. So I took 6 months off. We did a live show in Europe. We were invited to perform a live Rap News show in Europe, in Berlin, at a symposium which is all about organized by hackers and crypto specialists. It was all about investigative journalism and encryption. It was a fascinating scene, and the Rap News had captured a lot of that audience in Europe, and especially in Germany, around as I mentioned, around the digital rights and encryption movement, the Tor project, and all that. And so we took a bit of a break and had a bit of fun, traveled a little bit. And then I decided, okay, what are we going to do now? And I tried a couple of different things, and, just sort of like different types of videos. It was quite daunting. I was like, I don't know what else to do now. And then one day, just sitting with it, and I remember a friend said to me, like, it's okay to just sit with it and be okay with not knowing what's going to happen next. Sometimes the brain, we always need to know what's going to happen next, and what's the plan, what am I doing today, tomorrow, what's the 5-year plan? And we're very uncomfortable when we don't know. You can sit with it for a day or two, but then you start to get quite anxious. Well, I did anyway. And a friend told me, just learn to just see if you can just not enjoy, but just observe the feeling of what it's like not knowing, and give yourself a bit of time and space. And out of that time and space, one day, I think Lucy and I were Lucy is my partner who does the voice for the Honest Government Ads. We were reading, an article. No, thanks. I'll let her know. We were reading an article about something that the Australian government had done. They'd, the Great Barrier Reef is under great danger because of climate change and increasing temperatures, and the corals were bleaching. And basically, we're in the process here of killing this incredible natural wonder, which belongs to humanity. It doesn't belong to humanity. It's just part of this planet. And we were just so pissed off that the Australian government's response, because UNESCO had basically threatened to put the Great Barrier Reef under the list of endangered places due to climate change, and the Australian government protested against this and said, they petitioned UNESCO to remove Australia from this list of endangered spaces, as if that was like a fix. It didn't fix anything. All it did, it just covered it up. And we were so annoyed about this, and we thought, let's make a spoof ad, which is basically a tourist ad for the Great Barrier Reef. And it's basically visit Australia, and, we tell people about what's happening here. If the government is going to try and cover this up, we're going to try and make it known to people. And the response was fantastic. It was like the Rap News episodes that we'd done. People were like, loved it, and they loved the concept, and they loved that it was rude, and they loved that it didn't take any prisoners. It was just said things really straight.
It's the same kind of audience, right? From the Rap News.
No, there's an overlap. And maybe this is something that if you have any YouTube listeners, this will be of interest. But I think it's quite a hard thing to do a popular show on a YouTube channel, develop an audience. We had about 100 and something thousand subscribers with Rap News, and very dedicated and passionate audience. And it's quite hard then to go, hey, everyone, we're going to stop making the thing that you love now, but don't leave. We're going to do something else now. Yeah. Most people would say just leave that channel, create a new channel, start from the beginning. And I just couldn't bring myself to do that. I just thought, I thought it's not necessary, because the same ideas and political concepts and theories and ideas and humor are going to be a continuous thread that people will still recognize. But if you ask people this, our audience, a few people who used to love rap news will tell you that, yes, they still watch the juice media and they love the honest government ads, but quite a few will also say that they don't like, the honest government ads, and that they prefer rap news. And so, we would have naturally lost quite a few people who just didn't like. And, in the early days, probably in the first year or even year and a half of making honest government ads, I saw a lot of comments that people said, this is shit. What you were doing before was good. This sucks. You suck.
People are so mean. Why?
Yeah, no, people are very mean. And I just had to learn. Yeah, I just had to learn to really just ignore those comments, and sometimes if they were really persistent, I would just, hide them and go, cool, well, I don't need that energy. It's not helping me now, and you're not helping me to do what I need to do next. But basically that was only for the first year or so, and then slowly the people who didn't like what we did just left, and the people who liked it stayed, and then we got many more people coming and joining the channel anyway. So, but it was a very hard transition to make, and I don't.
Would you do it again?
I don't envy.
Or would you?
Yeah, no, definitely, but only because, like I said, because I knew that I was continuing something. That I didn't change the heart and soul of it, which was the writing and the kind of humor and the kind of satirical tone was the same, but it was a completely different show. It was a completely different delivery. I mean, rap news was very loud. It was rap. We had dope beats and like fantastic rhyming and clever costumes, and it was kind of out there. It was pretty crazy, and honest government ads is a completely different style of. It's much more. It's in a way, it's a lot simpler. It's a lot more straightforward. And so anyway, what was really at the heart of it stayed the same. And so I feel like if that's the case, you can continue a channel. But if you're going to do something, if you did a collaboration with one person, and then if I'd done a collaboration with other people and it was going to have a different writers and all that, maybe I would have thought, okay, let's just do a different channel so that it can have a fresh start, Yeah.
Was Hugo okay on you keeping the channel?
Yeah, I started the channel before we even met, so it was always my channel. No, that was never an issue. Yeah, and obviously it was part of our parting agreement that he was very encouraging. Oh, you can continue doing rap news and doing that. And like I said, I thought I would actually continue doing that, but in the end, decided not to.
So one thing that I find really interesting from your about video is that you said that when you first started the honest government ads, you gave it 1 year to try to get enough money to at least cover your expenses, which is a different approach than the rap news, because now you're thinking about money from the start. Maybe not only about money, obviously, but at least this was part of your goal.
Yeah.
Did this change things? How you organize your videos? How you planned? Did it change anything?
No, I don't think so. Because the reason that all of a sudden now I was thinking about money is that I was a bit older, and Lucy and I were expecting to have a baby. Luca, who is he's now 4. He was born in 2017. So at the start of 2017, which by that stage we'd only made 4 or 5 honest government ads, we knew that we were going to have a child that we had to raise, and I have always been, I said if we're going to have children, we need to make sure that we've got our lives together. We need to be organized. We don't want to be, we want to, if we're going to bring a person into the world, we want to give them, a decent start in life, which means not being under financial pressure, or I mean, everyone's under financial pressure, and that didn't change, but just not being broke, and not being just completely not having a clue what we're doing. So when I said I gave myself a year to reach a certain level, it wasn't like in a year we needed to be like smooth cruising. I just wanted to cover our expenses so that I knew that I wasn't funding this project out of my own pocket and losing money. So the 1 year deadline was, what do you call it? A milestone was just to make enough money to cover our expenses. And, if there was a little bit left over, great. I wanted to be able to just make sure that it was financially viable.
Right.
But the first few episodes that we made, we made very little money, no money. We had a few people on Patreon, but yeah, it was it was about the first 6 months was like, I knew that it was viable because the response that we were getting was really good, but it needed, I didn't want to ask people for money. It was something that, as I said before, I just wanted to make good content, and my experience had always been, you do good work, people come to you. People say, I want to support you to do this, and I didn't want to ask people, but it was probably getting close to the 1 year mark, and we weren't breaking even. It was still not, getting there. And right. I remember writing a post saying, hey, you've really loved watching these videos. The Facebook page has grown. We've got 100,000 people. The YouTube channel has grown. We've doubled our subscribers. We've had viral videos. One of the videos that we made about the Standing Rock protest against the Dakota Access Pipeline had over 10 million views on Facebook. So many people are watching and sharing these videos, but we only have about, I can't remember now, maybe 300 people on our Patreon, or 200 people on our Patreon. I can't remember what it was. Or maybe it was even less. And
these are people that are paying monthly, right?
I think at this stage it was per video. So initially I made it per video, but I changed that after a little while because I realized that part of I had to trust myself that, that I deserve to have a monthly income rather than, so I think a lot of people, when they start with Patreon, they go, okay, well, I'm just going to test it out and I'll do a video. And when I do a video, people can pay me. But, maybe in the next month, I won't be inspired to make a video or a song or a picture or whatever. And I feel bad people paying me. And I think that's fair. I think that's a good way to start on Patreon. But once you know that you've got an audience and you've got a product or something, something that people like, I think you just need to take the plunge and go, I'm going to switch to monthly now. And I am going to produce something every month. And if I don't, for some reason, I'll just explain to patrons that it's a little bit late or whatever, and you'll get paid anyway. And then maybe you do the video a week into the next month. And, even now after 5 years, that still happens to us. Sometimes we don't manage to get a video up before the end of the month. And I've just learned to accept that, you need to respect your own time and effort. And if you do that, other people will as well. And we've never had a problem with doing the monthly system.
Right. Because also people on Patreon, what I feel is that they want to support you, like, because they believe in your content, they believe in you and in what you create. So they don't even care that much if you skip a month. Of course, if you suddenly stop producing videos, they would, of course, care and maybe stop being a patron after a while. But if you skip a month, they don't care too much because they want to support you. They want you to make sure that you are okay, that you are healthy, and that you can continue producing this content that they really appreciate. It's something that it's changing a lot also in the internet. People in the beginning were thinking internet is free. We should either get it for free or download it for free. But now it's changing a little bit because people realize that there are no free lunches, right? So someone is paying for it. So it's better to pay directly to the people that are creating the great content than maybe paying for ads. So I think that's also a great way to think about it.
I agree, and you're probably right. But even as you say that, as a creator, I still feel, even after all these years now, after it's been 5 years that we started the Honest Government Ads, I still feel very bad about not making a video 1 month, and the only reason, if I do it, I always make sure to tell patrons, this is what we're doing, we're having a month off, and people are fine as long as you explain that's what it is. But even now, we only really take about a month off, and I always, even though sometimes I'm like, shit, it would be great to just like not just to unplug this month, I still feel that pressure to produce, and it's in a way it's you could say that maybe the patrons don't care, but I think generally there's an understanding. It's like, as long as you continue producing content, we'll continue supporting you. And if something comes up, just explain it. But there is an understanding that you are going to, that this is the flip side of it, is that it is, it is a demanding profession, and you do have to keep up production. I think if you don't approach it that way, you risk also not creating enough momentum and enough interest, because it needs to be a regular thing that you upload. And now we produce a video every month. That's very irregular compared to most YouTubers who do a video every week, or sometimes they do 3 videos a week, or sometimes they do a video every day. That's crazy. But 1 video a month is kind of quite unusual, especially because they're short videos. Mm-hmm. So if you look at, like, for example, there's some great YouTubers who are similar content to us, like Harry Bomber Guy and Philosophy Tube. They do like long form videos that might be like 30 minutes long, 40 minutes, sometimes even 50 minutes long, like ContraPoints as well. And they only do a video every 1 or 2 or 3 or 4 months, and they're very successful on Patreon because they've cultivated this new thing of like, no, we're not going to do something every day or every week. We'll do it 3 times a year, or 5 times a year. But when you get it, it will be amazing. It'll be really good. And that model works really well. So there are many different ways of doing it. And I think ours is a bit unusual because it's only once a month, and it's only about a 3 or 4 minute long video. So again, you can do it that way. There's no fixed way of doing it. But I think what does make it successful is just being, whatever it is that you do, make sure that your patrons know that that's what you're doing, so they know what to expect, and then you try and stick to that rhythm, whatever that rhythm is that works for you.
Yeah. No, makes total sense. I'm just, it's also important not to feel, I guess, trapped, that you need to do it, even though you sometimes you don't feel like it. Does this happen to you, that you be like, okay, I don't have anything in particular to speak about, but let's just create something because I have to do it?
It happens very rarely. Usually it's the opposite problem. It's like, there's so much shit. What do we do? Like, usually I don't think I've ever had the problem of like, I don't know what to say. Sometimes it can be almost paralyzing because there are so many things to talk about, and you feel like if you talk about one thing, you're missing out on another thing. And so that can sometimes be quite difficult, because what happens is you've got a month to make a video, and you spend the first 2 weeks just trying to decide what to make it on, and then you start writing it, and by the time you've written it, you've only got a week to film it, edit it, and upload it.
Yeah.
So sometimes that can be a bit pressure. But no, I've never had like, I've got nothing to talk about this month. Yeah. Unfortunately, because with the content that we cover, it'd be great if there was no climate crisis, no corruption, if there was like, there's no problems to talk about. I would love that.
It's great that you have a lot of things to talk about, and that you're passionate about it. After a year, then you asked your subscribers to start helping you out because you were still not making the cut budget-wise. Did they come through?
Yeah, look, I think a lot of people responded and said, hey, thanks for letting us know, because if you don't ask, sometimes you don't receive. And like I said, I wasn't used to asking. It had always been something that had happened naturally, and on this occasion, for whatever reason, it felt like the amount of support was not proportional to the amount of views and interest that the show was getting. And I later realized that the way that it was produced looked like it was quite a professional
definitely.
project.
Yeah.
And I think a lot of people said, they thought it was quite a, it already had funding, because obviously it looks so professional, and there must be a lot of money behind us. And I realized that people just didn't know that we filmed the videos in our lounge room. We literally had to move the furniture out the way to put the green screen up and the camera and have the actor and all that. And it was all done in our home. And people didn't know that, and so that's where I started to make these end of year videos, which I think you've seen, where I kind of explained who we are. This is what I'm doing. I explained how I decided to leave academia in order to do this work, and how I'd given myself this timeline. I introduced Lucy. I introduced our actors. I introduced a little bit of the some bloopers and behind the scenes stuff, and people started to get the sense, and a lot of people were in the comments were like, wow, I didn't realize this was like a family project. And that really changed things. Like, people really started to support us in that regard. Yeah,
definitely. I totally understand that, because when I first saw the movies you made, they seemed like a huge production, and then I think it was also the me watching your blooper videos that also got me to become a patron, because it's you are doing from your living room or something. It's very, very interesting, and I think that's also a great tip for other YouTubers. If you want people to support your project, give them a little bit of the behind the scenes. Show them that there's humans behind it, and that probably will help empathize more with you and your project.
Absolutely. And look, I think, before you asked if there was any marketing or anything like that, and now that I think about it, that's probably the only marketing that we did was just to tell people about us, so that there was that people knew what the human story was behind it. It's almost a cliche. This is like, you often hear about it. Oh, you need to, people need to know about this kind of stuff, and it's true. Otherwise people just assume that you're fine. Like you said, everything isn't. There's a realization now that if you do want quality original content, it has to be supported by the audience, because often this content doesn't make it onto TV. There's no way that we could have a TV show with the kind of political statements that we make. And I don't even want, like, a lot of people go, oh, have you ever thought about pitching it to the ABC, which is the Australian Broadcasting Corporation, or have you thought about pitching it to Comedy Central? I'm like, no, I haven't, because why would I want any sort of limitations on what we can say and how we say it? And yeah, the only catch is that you need your audience to support you if you want to do that.
Yeah, but it's also good because it's spread out throughout multiple people, right? So one or two people might stop supporting you, but that won't make a dent, right? Whereas if you are selling your show to ABC, for instance, if they stop, then you have all of your source of income is gone. And this way it's somehow more distributed, unless you just do a really fuck up video and then everyone's like, okay, unsubscribe, but that's very unlikely, right?
Maybe not even one. You'd have to make a few.
Exactly.
you would hope. I mean, that's really what I tell myself. But I try to never make a shit video, because I don't want to test that theory. I don't want to know how many you need to make. But look, that's exactly what happened with Russia Today. When that contract came to an end and they said, we're not going to renew it anymore, it really felt like now, and like I said, that was one of the two reasons that we ended that show, is that we didn't have that funding, and because we hadn't developed Patreon, like I said, we didn't even know how to use it. But even if we had known how to use it, it wouldn't have been enough at that point. Although, had we put more effort into it, had we invested time into making Patreon more of a thing, when Russia Today said, we're not going to renew your contract, we could have gone, well, that's okay. We've been preparing our Patreon channel and we're fine. But we didn't do that. And so, that's exactly what happened. We lost our funding, and then combined with, also the way that our collaboration was going generally, that ended the show, the project. But with something like this, where it's much more solid, much more safe, that doesn't rely on a contract ending. But the other thing that is different is, like, when you have a contract with a TV station or something like that, you can say one thing. It's not even a bad episode. You can say the wrong word about the wrong person, and that person is powerful and influential, and they'll complain to the government, and the government will, you won't hear it, you won't see it publicly, but behind the scenes, that show gets axed, and that's happened to quite a few political satire shows here in Australia that have dared to be too loud and a little bit too edgy and provocative, and they just disappear within a year. That happens. Yeah, there was a very good show here called Tonightly with Tom Ballard, and it got axed after a year because somebody on there called a politician a cunt. You might have to bleep that on your show, I don't know, but and that didn't go down well, and they axed it. We say cunt a lot on the Honest Government ads, and we have never been axed, and that just shows.
Even though YouTube might not like that too much, right?
I don't even care. Like we still put it on. Like we don't even like. I've bleeped it out a couple of times, but it's not because of the YouTube ads. Sometimes I just do it because I'm getting sometimes people complain about the language that we use, and so I thought, okay, we'll start doing that. But but I haven't bleeped it up, and YouTube has never picked us up for that. Right. I don't know why, but even if they do, I don't really care that much. Yeah, we still swear quite a lot in the videos, and we don't bleep it out.
Yeah, and I think that's the beauty of this new movement with Patreons and people supporting you. You get to be yourself, and I think that's really important, especially nowadays with a lot of the media being controlled. It's really great to have your videos. So I guess after that, it was only getting more patrons, getting more views. It's been more than 5 years since you started the Honest Government ads, right?
Yeah, so the first one was in May 2016. So it's 5.5 years now. Yeah. And look, a lot of things happened along the way that helped us to grow. I mentioned already talking about who we are and letting people know about what we do, asking for help, which I only really did in that first year. Mm-hmm. But then the next thing that happened that really took us to the next level was that the Australian government complained to us about using their logo and impersonating them. Mm-hmm. And I immediately knew that this was a wonderful, wonderful thing that had happened because it meant that the government was watching the videos, and so we made, because they sent us an email saying, it's come to our attention. Yeah, it's come to our attention that you're making these videos. We're concerned that they can be confused for real ads, and can you stop using the logo? And I thought, this is ridiculous. How could if anyone thinks that what we're making are real government ads, what does it say about this government? It must be a very shit government if you can't tell the difference between the real policy and the satire. And so we made a video in which we impersonate the government, telling the people of Australia not to impersonate the government, which I thought was very meta, and probably still one of my favorite episodes. and then at the end of that video, the Australian government that we impersonate tells people, don't support these people on Patreon. They're bad people. They're trying to break the law, and they're trying to, and then of course people love that. Here in Australia, there's this real sense that, as soon as you tell somebody not to do something, everyone's like, great, let's pay them to do that. And so that kicked us into another level of growth. And by this stage, I think we probably were close to 1,000 patrons.
Wow.
And then from that point on, it was just such a validation and such a strong feeling of like, wow, I've really got to do this now. Like even talking about it now, it makes me want to sit down and write an Honest Government ad, because I go, it's such a beautiful feeling working so hard for so long and dreaming about having something where you can work and have people supporting you for it. And then when it actually happens, you kind of have to pinch yourself and go, wow, is this really happening now? And then it's like, okay, I better not fuck it up, And so every time I went down to write an Honest Government ad, it was always like, how can I make this better? How can I surprise people? How can we introduce something different? It's small things, but something to, mix it up. And every time we did that, it wasn't every time, every video. Like some videos were good, but maybe not the best. But every now and then we just nail it, and we would get a whole bunch of new patrons, and people would love it and get shared. And then, and then that creates a snowball effect where we grew,
Definitely. I think you have a great momentum going now, and you make great content. And I think that's exactly what you say. When you make great content, people will just follow. So in that sense, I think you're completely right.
I would just say on that, because I think a lot of get get more views, and they read articles about how you can, make a better thumbnail or choose a better title, or have better tags or have better this or better that. And all of those things help, and they're very important, but they only really help if the content is good. You can't make, in fact, people hate it when it's a shit video, but you've got a fantastic thumbnail. It's like clickbait,
Yeah, true.
You see that quite a lot. And now they've taken away the dislike button, so you can get away with it more. But before, you'd see these videos and you click on them, and it's like, all dislikes and no likes because someone had used a shitty great thumbnail for a terrible video. So I think all of those things are important. Those customizations are great, but I would say put 95% of your effort into writing content that you love, that people will find interesting. It's well written. If it's comedy, obviously it's got to be funny, but it doesn't have to be comedy. Whatever it is, just making it click and just kind of going, really kind of connecting. And for me, the thing that really inspires me is, like, again, I always say it as this feeling of like, we live in these historic times. Let's talk about what's happening. There are so many people that are interested in understanding what's going on, why the fuck these things are going. Like, obviously things aren't going right. People want to understand. People are hungry for knowledge. People really want honesty. We're tired of being lied to. We're tired of being tricked and delayed and denied and all of this sort of shit. I'm talking specifically about climate, but you can apply that to so many different things. And so for me, when I say good content, is like, let's talk about that. Let's help people to understand that. So it's fun, but it's also useful. I think good content is entertaining, but it also provides something that people really need, and so obviously some people want to know how to cut cheese with a sword, like a medieval sword, like you said. And that's, if there's an audience for that, great. But in my case, and I think maybe a lot of people listening are thinking, great, that's a good way of thinking about how to approach this. Let me stop wasting time going to workshops about how to customize a thumbnail, and let me actually sit down, maybe with a glass of wine or light a joint or whatever it is that you need to kind of like tap into that space and try and really connect with this moment of history that we're in. Because if you can do that, people are gonna find it of value, and if you can keep doing it, people will support you.
Yeah, definitely. I think those are truly inspiring words, and I hope that the listeners here will get that and get inspired to create content to change the world for the better. That's what I also appreciate. I appreciate that from entrepreneurs as well as yourself, creating things that actually making the world a better place. And I find that super inspiring. Either you're doing that on YouTube, you're doing that with a startup, whatever. Just the fact that you're thinking on making the world a better place, it's already something that really, really inspires me. And Giordano, I think we could talk for hours. You're such an interesting person to talk to. You have so many interesting things, so down to earth as well. I think you and your family, it's so nice, because you see such a big channel, right? And I always get it for, okay, and I want to speak with them, but I always think that they won't take the time because they're too busy. And the fact that you did, it's really, really amazing. So thank you very much. Before we close, I just have one quick question, a curiosity of mine. So Lucy, your partner, she does the vocals for all the actors, right? Why did you decide to do this? Why is there like one voice for all the different personas?
Yeah, it's a question that we get a lot, I explain it in the podcast. So the Juice Media podcast. This is something that I haven't spoken about, but one of the things that really helped the channel to grow is to expand. So we did the Honest Government Ads, but then I realized that I had a lot more things that I wanted to talk about around each episode, and so I created the podcast about 2 years ago. And so every time we do an Honest Government Ad, then we have the podcast, and that really helped to, again, expand our audience and get more people to support us. So that's another thing, that people might want to think about, is that once you do have a project going, it's nice to think, well, how can I add something, that sort of sits on the side, Right. And in episode 2 of the podcast, I talk about this. Lucy and I did the podcast together, and we addressed some of the questions that we often get, and this was one of them. And look, it wasn't something that we planned out. Like, we didn't sort of go, this is why we're going to do it. I now, in retrospect, there are a lot of benefits to doing it this way. But the reason we started doing it is that when we were doing rap news, Hugo was the rapper and he did all the voices for all the characters. But when we had female characters, which usually he impersonated as well on video, we wanted to use a female voice. So Hugo and Lucy would work on the raps together, and I would, Lucy is my partner, and so we live together, and so we were like, oh, we need a female voice. Lucy, can you come and do it? And we would just drag her in, and she'd be like, no, really, I don't know how to do it. And be like, yeah, it'll be fine, And so we got her involved, and so from the start, Hugo was miming Lucy's words when we were doing female characters. Not every character. Some characters he did the female voices, but for some characters he did it. And so that was the method that we perfected. And rap news itself is all mimed. So we would record the rap in the studio to get that good vocal quality, because you can't rap on a lapel mic or a boom mic. You need to be close to the microphone. You need to have a condenser mic, vocal mic, and you need to be in a little booth, to get that good rap. You got to get it properly compressed and everything. And so then when you film it, you're miming to the audio. So that's how we learned how to make videos. I'm not a video maker. We just did this because that's how rap news worked. I don't know how to do anything else. I don't even own a boom mic or a lapel mic, so I don't even know how to record actors' voices as they act. So that's how it started. But then we realized that actually this worked very well for the Honest Government ads. Okay, two reasons. One, because Lucy's voice is actually great. Like, she's got this really nice tone of voice, and she, as she, I call her a voice actor, but this is what she does. She doesn't do it professionally, and it just suits the tone perfectly. And the other advantage is that because we live together, I can, whenever we have time, we can lay down the vocals. I don't need to get the actor to come in, and then if we need to change something, I need to get the actor to come back. But then the third reason that really works well this way is that when you're watching commercials, the audio is very fast. They generally tend to be quite snappy and fast. And the way that I edit them is, Lucy will say, "Hello, I'm from the Australian government," and then we'll do a separate take where she says, in today's, I'm just making this up now, but in today's episode, we're going to talk about this new policy that we've come up with, introducing the, whatever policy, And you take those three different takes and you take out the breaths in between them, and you sort of overlap them so that as one is finishing, as you hear the end of "Hello, I'm from the Australian government," the next one starts. And so you start to get this really strong feeling of momentum, which feels like an ad. And you can't do that if you're filming an actor saying the lines to screen, because you can't cut. You can't cut out breaths, and you can't cut out things from the video. You would notice it,
Right.
But you can manipulate the audio, you can cut out the breaths, you can edit it together so that it's nice and tight. And then when you film the actor, they just have to do that snippet, and then you film them doing the next line, and then you edit it all together. And if it's done properly and decent continuity, it actually flows. Everything feels very much tighter and quicker. And also the vocal quality sounds better, as I explained before, because we've recorded the audio in a booth. So all of those things combined is why we did it, and then why we continued doing it. I was like, well, it works. People like this voice. It suits the style of the videos, and it's lovely also having Lucy involved. It feels like that's a real family project. And the actors, everyone, we all accept that none of us has a complete role. Like, I write the videos, but I'm not in them. Lucy does the voice, but she's not in them. The actors are in them, but it's not their voice. So it feels like it's a real kind of high, I don't know what you want to call it, like postmodern pastiche weird thing. And but ultimately it works. And if it works, don't fuck with it.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, I don't know what it is, but it definitely works. It gives you like a special effect. Maybe that's also what you explained, but I don't know. It's really interesting. It makes it a little more catchy,
Yeah.
I think I was curious about why, but I totally
Yeah.
agree that
And
it
look,
makes a lot. It's really nice.
sometimes it doesn't work great because sometimes you notice that
Yeah, but
that
it's
it's
funny.
that it's
That's
done.
I like
Yeah,
about it. Yeah.
it's funny. Some people don't like it. Some people find it distracting,
Mhm.
and that's it. I think some people's eyes, brains are more sensitive to that than others. So some people don't. We've had some feedback about that, but majority of people love it, and it works really well in terms of our workflow as well. So, the other thing is like if sometimes we need to change a line, I don't need to get the actor back in and refilm, put the green screen up. We've got to refilm that whole thing. I
Right,
just get
right.
Lucy. She's in the other room. I'm like, hey, Lou, can you come in and just do this line? And in 5 minutes, we can fix a problem instead of having to book the actor to come back in,
It may be also a good tip for other YouTubers because
Yeah.
it's the first time I've seen the channel doing this. So maybe it could be a pioneer in that area.
Yeah, or maybe we'll be the last one because everyone's like, yeah, nah, that's not, I think if you've got a budget and you've got a team, it's probably a different story, like if you've got someone taking care of the audio, maybe we could do it differently. But
Yeah.
this is all just done on our own, and I'm not a professional video maker. I've just learned
But you
as I
do
go
have.
along.
It's really, even though you say you're not a professional, it does look like a professional work. With all the effects you do, it's really, really amazing. Did you learn all of this on YouTube too?
Yeah, I mean, Rap News, when we started, if you look at the first episode of Rap News, it's terrible. Like, it's really bad. Like, it's not properly lit. The camera doesn't even hold still. It wobbles because we're on a carpet. And when Hugo's moving around, you can see it moving and the lights are moving. And it was terrible. I didn't even know how to move things horizontally or scale things, So every episode of Rap News that I edited was like a learning process. And it was really hard, learning how to key, how to use a green screen and how to light things properly. We didn't even know how to do the white balance on the camera until like episode 8, and someone said, hey, in a comment there was like, you should really use the white balance because everything looks yellow. So I wouldn't recommend doing it like this. I think maybe getting someone who can teach you how to do these things is a better way to do it. But
you always have to start like this. I mean, if your first episode was amazing, then you just released it too late.
Yeah,
that's what they say.
But
right?
you see, again, because the content was good, it didn't matter. These things really didn't matter. People actually thought it was funny that it was such good content, like good writing, and it was relevant and it was funny, and it just looked like shit. So people liked it. I think the one thing you can't be shit is the audio. It's got to be good audio. And thankfully, that's, you remember at the start when I told you when I was doing my PhD, I was watching a lot of YouTube videos and playing music. That came in handy because I had a little recording studio on my computer and I used to write and record music. And so that was one thing I did know how to do. I spent a lot of time learning that from forums. So I had a good mic and a good preamp and a good sound card, and I knew how to get a good vocal take, and that really came in handy for Rap News and the Honest Government ads.
Yeah, it's funny how things we learn in the past, that we think they are completely unrelated and we'll never use it, then they come in the future, come in handy. In this case, for this project, and the same happened to me as well. I love music, and I like to play a little bit with it. And because I learned a little bit when I was playing around with it. Now I can also use it for my podcast, for instance. So, it's interesting how things you learn can always be useful in the future.
That's right. Absolutely. Yeah, it's beautiful. It's quite a fun journey, and obviously it's also a very privileged journey to be on because so many people don't have the opportunity to have the experience of learning these skills. And so obviously I always recognize also that it's also very fortunate to be in that position. But absolutely, it's all about how do you then put those things to use, and this is part of the way we try to do all of this is to give something back and to sort of make ourselves useful, or at least not make things worse.
If you could leave one last message to the listeners here, connected with the mission of your project, what you're trying to transmit, would you advise something for people, maybe to be more aware, maybe to try to question things, some mentality hack or something. Would you like to have something to say for the listeners as a last note?
I think for me, personally, the thought that I always come back to, and sometimes it's easy to kind of get a bit lost and go, what am I doing? What am I trying to do here? And it all, I always remind myself to come back to that original thought that is kind of the spark and the rock that sort of gives me a point of reference, which for me is, what are we doing here? What is happening? Like, not just like, what's the news, but actually what is the story that we're living out? How do we want this to go? It's such a historic time that we're in. There's the decisions that we make this decade collectively will define humanity for the rest of humanity on this planet. Every single person alive today has the burden and the responsibility, but also the privilege of deciding how the story is going to go, and it's going to be decided this decade because of the climate crisis. There's no, what we decide this decade will determine the following decades, and so people don't realize this, and that is such a crazy thing to not realize. And so if you can just help people to understand where we are now, what the stakes are, how important it is to be aware and to tune in and to play a part and do whatever you can. It doesn't, as Greta said when I interviewed her on the podcast, just do whatever it is that you can. It can be anything. It can be journalism. It can be activism. It can be get into law. It can be support people who are doing the work, volunteer. It could be getting into politics, running for a political office in your local council or state or whatever. It's basically standing up and being counted in this time, so that we can, as history is happening, we can take charge of that and decide where this journey goes next. And for those of us who have children, who are thinking of having children, it's really about giving them the opportunity to have that chance to take the next steps, whether it's traveling into space, or whether it's about solving problems here on Earth. If we don't fix this problem now, this decade, they won't have a chance to address those challenges. And there are obviously a lot of challenges, racism. There are a lot of problems that we need to fix, but we won't fix any of them if we don't get this decade right. So, that's what it always comes back down to, is what is happening right now, and getting people to not only to pay attention but also to care about it.
Yeah, definitely. I couldn't agree more. I think those are very, very nice words to finish our episode here. Giordano, thank you so much. I will link your podcast, Juice Media, your Twitter account, your Instagram, anything you want me to link, really. I will link it in the description, the show notes of this episode. And thank you very much. It was a pleasure.
Thank you, Tiago. It was a real pleasure as well. Thanks for supporting us on Patreon. I really appreciate that. And thank you for the work that you're doing with this podcast, which I think is also very, very valuable and very important. And I wish you all the best. Keep at it. And, it's I'm really glad that you have enjoying it as well, as providing something useful. So thank you for all the work that you do.
Thank you, Giordano. And now for the listeners, if you are an entrepreneur and want to learn more from others in their own journeys, make sure to check out my previous interviews. There's a lot to learn from. So just go to wannabe-entrepreneur.com and you can find everything there. Besides that, if you want to support this podcast, make sure to share it around, and you can buy me a coffee or become a supporter. All the information will be in the description of today's episode. This was another Wannabe Entrepreneur. See you next time.